He was a billionaire whose children buried before he even had the chance to die. Chief Ben lay in his massive mansion, his eyes closed and his breathing shallow. Outside his door, his son and daughter whispered about burial plans. Not a single prayer escaped their lips. Not a single tear was shed for the man who had given them everything. To them, he was already gone, just a body waiting for the ground. This is the story of Chief Ben, a man whose riches shone brighter than the midday sun, yet his heart only knew the darkness of loneliness. He was a lion among men, owner of lands, fleets of cars, and businesses that stretched from the red soil of Enugu to the cold streets of London. But as his hair turned white and his body grew slower, Chief Ben began to fear not the cold hand of death, but the colder heart of those he called his own. For though his compound was full, his laughter had long faded, replaced by whispers of grief, and children who counted his wealth more often than they counted their blessings. Chief Ben had 2 children who carried his name like a badge, but treated it like a burden. Oliver, his only son, was a man drunk on pleasure. Women flowed in and out of his life like the river Niger, each one more beautiful and costly than the last. Clubs knew his name. Hotel suites carried his scent. He spent millions spraying money in the air, as if wealth grew on trees in their compound. His sister, Sonia, was no better. The sky was her playground, with Paris today, Dubai tomorrow, and New York next week, all at the expense of the old man who had sweated under the sun to build a fortune. They visited their father's house only to withdraw, not caring about the man who made all this a reality. Chief Ben's heart grew heavy. What kind of children would dance on my grave before my body grows cold? He asked his reflection one quiet night. He called his lawyer and hatched a plan. A plan to see where the hearts of his children truly rested. The next morning, news spread like wildfire. Chief Ben had fallen gravely ill. His compound was filled with murmurs and the smell of false tears. Oliver and Sonia put on faces long enough to fool the neighbors, but behind closed doors, their whispers were venomous. Finally, the old lion is falling, Oliver muttered to his sister as they both chuckled. Soon, everything will be ours, they said as they married in their hearts. It was only Emily, Oliver's wife, who did not join the vultures' dance. Emily, the flower of Nsukka, as graceful as the morning dew and as patient as the earth itself. She had married Oliver out of love, only to discover she had been bound to a man whose heart was colder than iron. Oliver humiliated her openly, flaunting his mistresses before her eyes, laughing at her pain. He gave her no children, no comfort, only insults and abandonment. Yet, when her father-in-law fell ill, Emily took it upon herself to become his caretaker, feeding him and sitting by his bed through the long nights while others parted with his money. But Oliver's cruelty did not end with neglect. As Emily sat by the old man, Oliver would return home drunk, the stench of perfume clinging to him like smoke. You waste your time on a dying man, he sneered one night, his eyes bloodshot. Better to let him go quickly so we can finally leave. He would stagger into the room, hurling curses at his father. Once, in a fit of rage, he even unplugged the fan in his father's room, saying, "Why waste electricity on a man who will soon be cold in the grave?" Emily wept silently as she plugged it back in, assuring Chief that she would never leave his side. And Chief Ben, though pretending to be too weak to speak, felt each word like a dagger in his chest. In the days that followed, Chief's house began to feel less like a home and more like a marketplace of vultures. Oliver and Sonia would sit in the parlor, sipping expensive wine, counting the days like impatient merchants waiting for goods to arrive. One evening, Oliver's voice cut through the air like a machete. "Sonia, this old man is stubborn. He holds on to life while we waste away waiting. Why don't we speak to Dr. Tunde? A little injection can hasten things. The dead do not complain." Sonia, who had once been Daddy's little girl, looked around nervously before nodding. If it is done quietly, who will know? Emily, who was returning from the kitchen, overheard their evil plans and shuddered. She pressed her ear to the wall as Sonia and Oliver laughed about their plans. Her heart raced to realize how evil they had become. Tears filled her eyes But she did not run to Chief Ben with the news. Instead, she doubled her watch, making up her mind never to leave his side. From that night on, Emily barely slept. She ordered the maids to bring her a mat as she began to sleep on the floor of Chief's room. She became a silent guardian for a man who was not even her father. A man who had shown her more respect than her own husband. Sometimes, she would whisper to him as he pretended to sleep, assuring him that for as long as she lived, no one will ever hurt him. Emily was his only pillar. She cared for him and shielded him from the wicked plans of his children. Oliver grew more wicked as the days went by. He began to sell off most of his father's properties without permission and used the money to buy a brand new Range Rover for his mistresses. A woman who was bold enough to walk into Chief's compound to belittle his wife Emily. She looked Emily in the eyes and warned her to stay away from Oliver, calling her a desperate and classless woman. Emily was so furious to hear this. However, she could not bring herself low to banter words with a woman who she knew was not worthy of her attention. She remembered the popular saying that he who holds the tortoise shell holds the right to speak. And Emily knew that her time to speak would come, but it was definitely not today. The days turned into weeks, and the vultures grew restless. Oliver began to openly insult his father. "Old man, you should sign your will now before death snatches the pen from your hand. Do not be selfish. Give us what is ours, so we can enjoy life while you fade away." When Emily protested, Oliver turned on her like a wild dog. "Shut your mouth, Emily. You think sitting by him will make you rich? You are nothing here. When he dies, I will make sure you leave this house with only the clothes on your back." He spat on the floor and stormed out, leaving Emily trembling. Chief's eyes were closed, but his chest tightened from grief. He could not believe how vile his son was towards him. A son that he had provided everything for, without expecting anything in return. "What curse have I brought upon myself to father a son like this?" he thought to himself as he laid there still from a broken heart. That night, Chief Ben opened his eyes and called on Emily. His voice was weak, but his words were sharper than a blade. "My daughter," he whispered, "I am so sorry for all that my son has put you through. It's so sad to see the true colors of those who call me father. You alone have shown me love. You alone have given me water when my own blood let me thirst. Fear not, for I see you, my daughter. The day of reckoning is coming, and the yam that belongs to the patient goat will never enter another pot." Emily wept silently as she held his hand. Her heart broke to see the pain in Chief's eyes. He didn't deserve what his children were doing to him, and Emily could not help but feel pain to see him this way. The next morning, Oliver stormed into the compound with two of his mistresses, laughing loudly as if the house was a market square. They trailed behind him, wearing perfume so strong that it choked the entire air. "Emily!" he barked, finding her kneeling beside Chief's bed. "Go and prepare the guest room for my visitors," he said, as he gestured towards the young women whose clothes barely covered their body. "These are my beautiful visitors, and they will stay for as long as they wish," he said to Emily, whose eyes were swollen from lack of sleep. She turned to Oliver to remind him of his father's condition, but Oliver, instead of listening, slapped her across her cheek. "Do not question me in my father's house, woman. I own this place now, whether he breathes or not. Do as I say." The mistresses giggled, their laughter sharp as broken glass. Chief Ben's fists tightened under the covers, his old heart burning with a rage that he kept buried for the day when his play would finally end. That night, as the mistresses feasted in the living room, Emily sat by Chief Ben's side, holding back tears as she began to speak. "Papa, I am tired. I married your son with hope, but he treats me like dirt beneath his feet. If not for you, Papa, I would have left him long ago." Chief opened his eyes slightly and said, "My daughter, the chicken that scratches too deep will one day meet the snake. You, Emily, must not let your hands grow weary. Continue as you are, and God will reward your patience, even when men mock it." Those words were the only thing that kept her heart from breaking completely. A week later, Oliver did something so heartless that no one could believe. He called a meeting with the family's lawyer, right there in the parlor, where his father could hear every word. "Draft the will," Oliver ordered. Put everything, every company, every property, every account under my name. Leave a small token for my sister Sonia so she does not cry too loudly. And leave nothing for my wife Emily. She is not part of this family in my eyes." The lawyer looked at him nervously as he began to stammer. "But Chief is still alive. We can't possibly share his property without his consent," he said to Oliver, who slammed his hand on the table. "Alive in body, but dead in spirit. We can settle this before the grave swallows him." Emily, standing quietly at the doorway, felt her knees weaken. Chief was hearing every word from his room, and the more that Oliver spoke, the more his chest tightened. Hours passed, and Oliver sat in the living room with his sister. He discussed how grand their father's burial will be. "The old man will go soon," he said coldly as he puffed on his cigar. "We must be ready. I want his funeral to shake the earth, not for him, but for us. It will show the world that we are now the rulers of this empire." Sonia, sipping wine, nodded eagerly. "Yes, let it be grand. A parade of cars, horses, musicians, everything. The people must know we have arrived." Emily could not believe her ears. She stood in the corner as she overheard their entire conversation. Her eyes burned with fury as she wondered how she ended up with a man like this. She walked into Chief's room to realize that he also overheard everything. She tried to calm him down, but surprisingly, Chief was so calm. He didn't say a word as he lay there frozen, staring at the ceiling. A single tear slid down his cheek to realize that his own children had buried him even when he was still breathing. That same evening, Oliver's cruelty turned on Emily again. He returned from one of his drunken outings and found her arranging medicines by Chief's bedside. "What are you still doing here?" he sneered as he accused her of pretending to be a saint so that his father would leave his properties for her. "You foolish woman, even if my father gives you a pin, I will take it from you. In fact, when he dies, you will follow him out of this house because no wife of mine will ever inherit anything that belongs to me." When Emily tried to explain that she had none of such intentions, Oliver grabbed her by the arm and shoved her against the wall. "Stay away from the lawyer. Stay away from my father, or else you will regret the day that you stepped your foot into this family." Chief heard it all. Every slap, every insult, every greedy word that his son had uttered. And that night, when the compound grew silent, he called his lawyer in secret. "The time has come," he said, his voice cold but steady. "Prepare the documents. My son and daughter will learn what it means to build wealth with their own hands. Emily, the only one who showed me kindness, will not be left to suffer. When the masquerade finishes its dance, the world will know who wore the mask." His plan was set in motion quietly, while Oliver and Sonia slept soundly, dreaming of the riches that they would never see. The next morning, it was as if a strange calm settled over the compound. The old man lay in his bed, feigning weakness as always, but there was a glint in his eye that Emily noticed for the first time in weeks. When she leaned close to offer him water, he whispered, "My daughter, be strong, for the yam is almost ready for harvest. Do not let their noise disturb your spirit. When the drum beats at midnight, the masquerade will show its true face." Emily frowned, not fully understanding his words. However, something inside of her told her that the storm was about to break. She tried to speak to her husband again, pleading with him to show care to his father, but Oliver called her an attention seeker, saying that her desperation might have been the reason why her parents died and left her alone. "I'm sure they couldn't stand your pretense and decided to rid themselves of their misery," he said to Emily, who broke down as she remembered the tragic way her parents died a few years ago in a fire. Oliver was not willing to change. That evening, he hosted a party at a popular club, spraying bundles of cash like a useless spoiled brat. He even mocked his father openly in front of strangers, saying that the old man was as good as dead. "Soon I will show Enugu what real wealth looks like." The crowd cheered, not out of respect, but because money blinded their eyes. When he returned home drunk that night, his wickedness crossed a line so deep that no one ever anticipated. Emily had dozed off on the mat beside Chief when Oliver barged into the room drunk. Get out, he barked, grabbing her by the wrist and dragging her to the corridor. I told you to stop pretending to be the dutiful daughter-in-law. You disgust me. In his drunken rage, he shoved her hard, and she stumbled down the small set of steps outside the room, bruising her knees as she landed to the floor. Chief sat up in that moment. As his hands trembled, he stood up from his bed and walked up to Oliver, who was so shocked to see his father hale and hearty. Even Emily opened her eyes in complete shock as she watched Chief land his son a dirty slap across his face. Chief's hand cracked across Oliver's face like a whip. His mistress, who had followed him into the house, gasped as she fled like a frightened goat. Oliver staggered back, his eyes wide, as his drunken haze instantly evaporated. Papa, you were not dying? He stuttered as he clutched his cheek. Chief stood firm, his frame still imposing despite his years. Dying? He thundered, his voice booming through the compound like a gong. I was dying, yes, but not of sickness. I was dying of heartbreak, of the poison in my own children. You and your sister buried me while I still breathed, planning my funeral as though I were a goat for slaughter. You sold my land, mocked my name, and raised your hand against your own wife in my house. Today, Oliver, the masquerade has removed its mask, and you will see the reward of your greed. That night was the longest night for Oliver and his sister, Sonia. They stayed up all night, pondering on what their father will do to them. I know Dad is hurt, but he can't possibly do anything that will hurt us, Sonia said to Oliver, whose heart continued to race. All his life, he had never seen his father this angry, not even the time that he almost wrecked their entire company. His father did not look this angry with him. Oliver could not help but shiver as his mind scanned through every possible thing that his father could do, and Oliver knew in that moment that they were doomed. Morning came, and the house was full of tension. The maids all whispered between themselves as they found it hard to believe that Chief was fine. Emily, however, locked herself up in her room. She had thought that Chief was sick, not knowing that it was test. A part of her was glad to know that he was fine. However, she feared what Chief was going to do with his children, who showed him nothing but hatred. She sat there deep in her thoughts when one of the maids knocked on her door to reveal that she had been summoned. Emily could not help but shake in fear. She arrived in the living room and met everyone, including Chief's lawyer, waiting for Chief to arrive. She sat in the corner quiet as Chief walked out of his room like the king that he was. Oliver and Sonia huddled together in fear as the lawyer stood up and began to speak. By the order of Chief Ben, all properties, vehicles, and business interests formerly accessible to Oliver and Sonia are hereby revoked. They are to vacate this compound immediately, with no car, no house, and no inheritance. The Insuka mansion, a part of the family businesses, and personal trust accounts are hereby transferred to Emily as a form of gratitude for her loyalty. Oliver's knees nearly buckled as the word sank in. Papa, you can't do this. We are your blood, he cried, his voice cracking. Chief's eyes were cold as stone. Blood? He said. Blood does not plot the death of its source. You are no children of mine until you learn to build with your own hands. Leave my sight now, he said, as he ordered his security to escort them out of the mansion. Their cars were repossessed and their credit cards deactivated. At first, they stayed with friends in the city, believing that it was only a matter of time before they could reclaim their old lives back. But weeks passed and nothing happened. Their friends, realizing that they were broke, chased them out of their house, not caring that they had nowhere else to go. Oliver and Sonia found themselves sleeping under bridges in Enugu, moving from one overpass to another, their once famous names now whispered with pity and scorn. Passers-by, who once envied their wealth, now pointed and mocked them. Are these not Chief Ben's children? The ones who buried their father before he even died? They said as they laughed them in their faces. Oliver called all his mistresses, including the one that he bought a Range Rover, begging for a place to stay or food to eat. One by one, they cut him off. Some blocked his calls entirely, whilst others laughed. Oliver, you were only a king when the money was flowing, one sneered before hanging up the call. A crippled man with empty pockets is of no use to me, another said. Even Sonia found no single friend willing to help. All the friends she had traveled the world with, the same women who had once posed beside her in Paris and Dubai, refused to open their doors. One even told her to her face that she brought nothing but borrowed glamour to them, and now that her pockets are empty, they had no business being friends. Soon, Oliver and Sonia had nothing. No friends, no money, no roof over their heads. At night, they huddled under torn blankets beneath the pedestrian bridge, rats scurrying near their feet, the cold harmattan wind cutting through their bones. Each passing day, their faces grew thinner, their eyes more hollow. The same mouths that once shouted for champagne in clubs now begged strangers for bread. However, back at the mansion, Emily pleaded with Chief to forgive them. Her voice trembled as she knelt by his chair beneath the palm tree. Papa, they are broken now. They have lost everything. Maybe it is time to bring them back, even if only to teach them not to suffer them. But Chief's face was like carved stone as he shook his head slowly. My daughter, a tree that is bent must first feel the storm before it can grow straight. If we shelter them now, their hearts will never change. Let them sleep under the sky. Let the cold teach them what my words could not. If I ever hear that anyone here sends them money or food, I will drive them from this house as I drove those two. His warning hung heavy in the air, and the mansion remained silent. Weeks dragged into months. Oliver and Sonia, once the envy of Enugu, became the shame of the streets. Their hair grew matted, their clothes tattered, as their skin turned pale from hunger. People took pictures of them, posting online. Look at Chief Ben's children, from Paris to pedestrian bridges. One rainy night, Oliver, his voice hoarse from days without food, looked up at the dark clouds and wept openly, his tears mixing with the rain. God, please, forgive me. I am sorry for all the terrible things that I did. I was blind, but now I see. If you can hear me, if you can find me in this pit, I will serve, not as a prince, but as a servant, until the day I earn my place back. He cried as the rains poured down on him. Just as he sat there hopeless, he heard his name from a distance. It was Buchi, his secondary school classmate, who he wronged so many years ago. Oliver always hated Buchi. Back in secondary school, he was the bully, whilst Buchi was the quiet, hard-working boy from a poor family. One afternoon, during their lunch break, everyone was eating their lunch except Buchi, who had no food to eat. Oliver, instead of being compassionate, called Buchi's father a lazy man. Didn't the Bible say that a man who cannot provide for his family is worse than an infidel? He said aloud to his friends, who all laughed and mocked Buchi's father for being poor. What they did not know was that Buchi's father was currently in a coma in the hospital. He lost his life on that same day, when Oliver mocked him and laughed at him, and Buchi never forgave Oliver for those words. In fact, he believed that Oliver's words were the reason why his father died in the hospital, and for all these years, he had carried the bitterness in his heart until he saw Oliver under the rain. Buchi in that moment stood over him, shocked to see Oliver on the streets. He looked at the broken man on the pavement, the same boy who once humiliated and mocked him. Oliver, is this truly you? Buchi asked, as Oliver bent his head in shame. Buchi sighed as he reached out for his hand. Get up. The world has punished you enough. You once laughed at me for having nothing, but now God has blessed me, and I will not treat you as you treated me. He pulled Oliver to his feet as he drove him away from the cold streets. In the days that followed, Buchi cleaned Oliver up and gave him food to eat. Despite their past, he offered him a job at one of his warehouses. Oliver, who once strolled into offices as a prince, now swept floors, loaded trucks, and took orders from the same man he had once mocked. Meanwhile, his sister Sonia, too ashamed to beg, met a man who showed interest in marrying her. He was not so wealthy, like the men that she had envisioned to marry, but life on the streets had taught her a lesson that changed her orientation about people. She realized that kindness and stability were worth far more than the flashy life that she once chased. Chike was a hard-working mechanic who owned a small workshop in Enugu. Though his earnings were modest, his love for Sonia was genuine. He treated her with respect, never for once throwing her past failures in her face. Sonia, humbled by months on the streets, accepted his proposal. It was not the fairy tale wedding that she had once dreamed of in Paris or Dubai. Instead, it was a quiet ceremony in a small church. She sent word to her father chief, praying that he comes. Sonia was so hopeful. She waited, clutching her bouquet tightly as the church doors opened with every sound, but her father never came. Only Emily arrived, her face warm but heavy with unspoken pity. She hugged Sonia tightly and whispered, assuring her that Chief still loved her. However, he is not ready. His wounds still bleed. But do not let his absence destroy this your new beginning, she said to Sonia, who could not hold back her tears. Emily stumbled into Oliver at the wedding and could not believe how he had transformed. From being the arrogant and proud man, Oliver was now so humble and calm. He approached her to apologize for all the terrible things that he did to her. Oliver pleaded for her forgiveness, promising to do better, and Emily, moved by what she was seeing, forgave him for his wrongs. Oliver asked after his father, who he had tried to see for the past 2 years. Whenever he arrived at the mansion, his father never allowed him into the gates. He never spoke to him, as he told the security at the gate never to allow him in. Emily assured him that his father still loved him no matter what. He still needs time and will come around soon, she said to Oliver, who thanked her for everything. Weeks passed, and Buchi called Oliver into his office one evening. A truck of goods will arrive at the factory tomorrow morning, but I won't be around. I trust you to handle the delivery and inspection. Make sure everything is signed and accounted for, he said to Oliver, who nodded firmly and assured him that he would take care of it. The next morning, Oliver stood at the factory gates as the truck arrived with the deliveries. He adjusted his shirt as he walked towards the truck driver, who turned out to be his own father. Oliver could not believe his eyes. His breath caught in his throat as he managed to speak. "Papa?" Oliver whispered, his clipboard slipping from his hand. Chief Ben, dressed in a simple work shirt and jeans, stood before him as he watched him tremble. "I can see that my son is now a man," he said to Oliver, whose mouth opened in disbelief. He stood there frozen as Chief asked him a question that he never saw coming. "Did you think your rescue was a coincidence? That Buchi's hand reached for you by chance? Years ago, when you mocked his father and crushed his spirit, the news reached me. I was furious, not only at your cruelty, but at the blindness in your soul. So, I paid for Buchi's education. I gave him this company when he finished school, and I told him, one day, if my son falls, you will lift him, not because he deserves it, but because mercy must teach him what wealth never could." Oliver staggered back, shame washing over him like a wave. "Papa, all this time, you knew? You watched me suffer?" "I let you suffer," Chief corrected, his voice firm. "Because only the cold ground can teach a man to value the roof, and only hunger can teach him to respect the hand that feeds him." As the weight of his father's words sank in, another car rolled into the factory. Out stepped Sonia, hand in hand with her husband Chike. She froze when she saw Chief standing there next to her brother Oliver. "Papa?" she said, her voice cracking as her father turned to her and smiled. Sonia broke down in tears. She could not believe that she was standing face to face with her father. It was like a dream come true, and Sonia could not help but apologize for all the terrible things that she did. Her father looked up at her and smiled. He told her how beautiful she looked on her wedding day, and Sonia looked up at him shocked. It was then that her father revealed to her that he attended her wedding, but not in the way that she expected. He disguised himself as the pianist who played at her wedding. It was then that Sonia's mind went back to the song that was played on that fateful day. It was her father's favorite song, and Sonia burst out in tears to realize that her father not only attended her wedding, but also played his song. Chief stepped forward as he began to speak. I could not give my blessing with words, but I gave it in song. I had to see with my own eyes if my daughter had truly changed, and I saw it that day. Humility suits you better than gold, he said to Sonia, who was overwhelmed with emotions. The siblings, once arrogant, spoiled, and heartless, fell to their knees before their father as they apologized. Papa, forgive us, Oliver choked out. We buried you before death even came. We spat on the hand that raised us. If you can take us back, not as heirs, but as children willing to work, we will serve you with all we got. Chief Ben looked between them, his weathered face softening at last. Stand up, he said quietly. Our lesson has been learned, and the masquerade dance is done. My wealth will no longer spoil you, but you will work, build, and learn. If you falter again, the streets will welcome you back. But for now, you are my children again. That was how Chief reconciled with his children, who learned humility the hard way. Oliver was no longer proud and arrogant. He treated everyone with respect and learned how to manage his father's wealth. He also reconciled with his wife Emily, who he treated like the queen that she was. Sonia became daddy's girl once again. She got involved in the family business and scaled it up in a way that no one imagined. Life from that day became blissful for Chief and his children, who all lived happily ever after. The lesson to be learned from this story is that the true measure of a person is not found in their wealth, power, or status, but in their humility, compassion, and respect for others. Riches without gratitude only breed arrogance, while privilege without responsibility leads to destruction. Oliver and Sonia learned that the comfort they took for granted was never truly theirs until they had felt the sting of loss and the weight of hard work. Chief Ben's test revealed that love and loyalty cannot be bought, and that sometimes the greatest act of love is allowing someone to suffer just enough to change. In the end, forgiveness, humility, and a willingness to rebuild with one's own hands became the true inheritance that saved the Ben family from themselves. I hope you enjoyed the story.